Let's continue with Pirkeh Avot. We're continuing the qualities of acquiring the Torah. So yesterday we finished off by saying, that a person has to have a Rabbi. He has to have a Chavruta, right? And what's the next one? As we said, right? There's also a third one, right? Which says the Pilpula Talmidim. So now, right, after you already had a Rabbi, you learn from him. You had a Chavruta, good. Now you need Talmidim. You have to take students also, right? So guys who are going to study from you. You're going to be the Rebbe, and they're going to be your Talmidim, and they're going to ask you questions. They're not teaching you; they're learning from you, right? They're asking you questions they don't understand. They're going to say, Rabbi, what does this mean? What is this Tosfot over here? What does that mean? How do you get the pshat in this Tosfot? What about this Rashba? What does this mean? Right? They're going to ask you, Rabbi, no, please, help us, to understand what's going on. So you got to explain to them, right? What's the pshat? How to read this? How to learn this? How to do everything? So the thing is, now we know, right, that you need three things. You need a Rabbi, you need a Chavruta, you need Talmidim. Which one do you learn the most from? That's the question, right? So David HaMelech said, right, I learn most from my Talmidim. He says, I learn from my rabbis a lot, and I learn from my Chavruta even more. And from my Talmidim, I learn even more than the Chavruta. Right? So you think, right, that I'm teaching them, the Talmidim, but really the truth is they're teaching you. Why is that? Because those questions that they ask you, they make you very sharp. You're able to answer their questions, to reconcile things for them, to explain it to them. And because of this, all of a sudden you get new things in your head you never thought before. These kinds of things, What made you think of these things? Because your Talmidim are sharpening you, by asking questions all the time. That's the whole thing, So from them you learn the most. That's why it says over here, Pilpul Talmidim, right? What does that mean, Pilpul? When the Talmidim ask you a question, right? It's not so easy to give them an answer. Sometimes you have to think about it, So you have to come up with some kind of an answer, to bend this a little bit over this way, right? To go this way, right? And to resolve their question, by thinking about it and coming up with a new idea, something new there. A chidush, something new that you never thought of before. Who helped you? Your Talmid helped you. That's the whole thing, So you learn the most from your Talmidim. And that's why it's important, to have Talmidim. A person who doesn't have Talmidim, he's got a problem, because he's just going to sit there alone by himself, learn without anybody, and he's not going to be able to get to the depths of the Torah like that. Even though he's already a big Chacham, he's old, person, he's 65, 70, but he needs Talmidim to sharpen him. Otherwise, he doesn't have that give and take, to Talmidim. So without that, right, it's very hard to... they say the Chazal, by the way, something interesting, about this. I'll tell you. A nice diuk from the Chazal. They say, that Shaul, right, was very jealous of David, right? There was a lot of jealousy there, Tina, right? That's why he was chasing him, to kill him, right? He was saying, listen, you Mored Malchut, you rebelled against me. It wasn't true. David did nothing wrong to him. Just the opposite, right? He was always helping him. But it was because of the jealousy, he was dying from the jealousy. He couldn't take it anymore. That's what it was. So the question is, what was he really jealous of, In other words, what did David have that Shaul didn't have? When you're jealous of somebody, that means he has something that you don't have, and that's why you envy him. So what was it? This is the question, What was it? They say, right, that in the beginning of the Sefer Shmuel, it says over there, that Shaul was head and shoulders above all the people, Mikitva b'mala, right? Mikol ha'am. That's what it says. So, simple meaning is what? He was taller than everybody else. Shaul was very tall, As we said, like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He was 10 amot, 5 meters, Shaul was also taller than everybody. He was head and shoulders, his shoulders was above already everybody else. His head was going above. He was the tallest guy around. That's what it means, simply speaking, literally. But they say, there's also a spiritual thing here, Spiritually, he was taller than everybody else also, Meaning what? That he was a bigger tzaddik than everybody else also. That's why he was zocheh, to become the leader. It's not for no reason. He was the biggest tzaddik. He was the biggest kadosh. He was the biggest chacham, So then, if that's the case, right, what do you have to be jealous of David? What does he have that you don't have? I mean, you got everything. And they say also, about Shaul, right, that he was the most handsome guy, like nobody was beautiful like him. They say that, when they would look at Shaul, you know what you would see? You would see the beauty of Yaakov Avinu, like this. He was like beautiful like Yaakov Avinu. He had the same beauty, beautiful face, like, something unbelievable. Most handsome guy. So if that's the case, what do you have to be jealous of David? What do you have from him? You got everything, He was also Gibor, right? He was fighting, winning the wars against the Palestine. He was going out, with his sons, Jonathan, him, right? Going out, fighting. Jonathan, going out, right? Fighting, yeah? They were tzaddikim. They were the biggest warriors also, Giborim, So what does David have over you? So you know what they say, right, the Chazal? There was one thing that David had that Shaul didn't have. Right? What is that? So you know what they say, right? That it says in Psukim like this over there, in Sefer Shmuel, that David, the halacha was like him, but Shaul, the halacha was not like him. So what does that mean? If Shaul give a psak halacha, the people will tell him, no, you're not right. They didn't accept his psak halacha. He wasn't accepted, his psak halacha. Even though he was melech, as we said, right? Melech is one thing, halacha is something else, two different things, right? One has nothing to do with the other. You know what I mean? In halacha, they didn't accept him, They were like, hey, listen, we don't like the way what you're saying. We have a different way to learn it out. So he wasn't accepted, right? That's what it says in the pasuk. We learn from pasuk, right? It says also, kol makom shepana yarshia, right? They say, right, the Chazal, they learn from there, that the people didn't accept his psak halacha. But David, right, that's the opposite, right? They say halacha kemoto. His psak halacha was accepted, by people. They accepted what he said in halacha. So the question is, why is that? Right? As we said, right, Shaul was taller than everybody else, bigger than everybody else. So why they didn't accept him and they accepted David? So you know what they say, the Chazal, right? The reason is because David had Talmidim, that he taught them. And Shaul didn't take Talmidim. This is the reason why. So as we said, right, what happens is that when you have Talmidim, they sharpen you, They ask you questions, you become sharp. And because of this, you get to the truth, you get to the emet from your Talmidim, right? But when you don't have Talmidim, you're just sitting there by yourself, learning. It's not the same thing, you don't go so deep into the emet. So this is the reason why they didn't paskin like Shaul, because he didn't have Talmidim. And because of that, he couldn't get to the depths of the halakha. He wasn't able to go that deep. So you see from there, right, how important it is to have Talmidim. Okay, you see, right, let's go on a little bit. So then, right, next one, right, is also very important. It says Be'yishuv. Right, Yishuv. What does it mean, Yishuv, in Hebrew? Yishuv. I'm not talking about living somewhere, right? Not that Yishuv. Liyashev, right? What does that mean?
To answer.
Right. Exactly. I want to get it out from him. I want to keep him awake. So, you know what it is, right? What it means is like this. Yishuv means that you're able to take like differing ideas, things which contradict, and bring them together, to like liyashev, to reconcile them. That's how they say in English, Liyashev in Hebrew means to reconcile. What does that mean? To bring two different ideas and put them together. You have the mind, for this, the brain power, to take a stira, a contradiction, and bring them together into one emet. Right? That's also, something that a chacham needs. So what does that mean? Chacham, is not just what they call this, right? Tell you something funny, right? There are some people, who memorize books, they know how to memorize. They read books, in Torah, and they remember, they know how to remember everything. They have a technique like this, photographic memory, whatever you want to call it, right? But the thing is, there are some people like this, they have photographic memory, but the problem is, they don't know how to manipulate all these ideas, and to their shift, to reconcile them, to bring them together. They don't have the brain power for that. So, what we call that, right? A person like this who doesn't know what to do, We call him Chamor Noseh Sfarim. What does that mean? Huh? Tell me, what does that mean? Chamor Noseh Sfarim.
It's a donkey that's carrying the books.
Right, exactly. He's a Chamor. He has books, on his back. He has a lot of books there, Chamor is strong, right? He can carry a lot. But the thing is, since he doesn't know how to bring them together, these ideas, he's a Chamor. So that's not a Chacham. Understand? That's the whole thing, So a person like this, who doesn't know how to bring things together, he just knows how to memorize books. This is not a Talmid Chacham. This is just a guy who has a good memory, There are people like this, by the way. There are rabbis, like this. They know so much, when you ask them a question, they bring you, here, from all kinds of sources, they bring you, but they don't know what to do with it, to bring them together, to come up with a conclusion. This is Yeshu, to bring things together, to put into one big piece. They don't know how to do this, That's not a real Talmid Chacham. He's a Chamor who has a lot of books, Noseh Sfarim, he's got books on his back. That's not enough, That's the thing, So, okay, maybe we'll do one more and we'll stop. Right? Okay. Exactly. He knows it by heart, right? The Israelis, they know everything by heart. You don't have to give them a book. They have everything memorized. Okay. So, right, next one is Mikra. As he said, right? What does this mean, Mikra? And we'll finish here with this one. Mikra means you have to learn. Mikra in Hebrew means the Bible, the Tanakh. You have to learn the Tanakh. This is a very important thing, A lot of people, by the way, today, a lot of the guys who go to the yeshiva, what happens is, they don't know the Bible, they don't know Tanakh, and they start learning Gemara, like straight, into Gemara, But this is no good, because you don't have a basis, you don't have a foundation, Yesod. You don't have. If you don't know Tanakh, and you're learning Gemara, you're not really a Talmid Chacham, You know what they said? One of my rabbis told me, what do we call a guy like this? He learns Gemara, but he doesn't know Tanakh. You know what we call him? Am Haaretz Deoraita. You know what that means? He's Am Haaretz from the Torah, not just a regular Am Haaretz. He's Am Haaretz from the Torah. So what does that mean, from the Torah? That means he doesn't know the Torah, he doesn't know the Bible, he doesn't know the Chumash, doesn't know the Tanakh. So a person like this, it's like he builds a big building, like an office tower, in Manhattan, right? 100 stories, right? But the problem is he has no foundation. He didn't build a foundation. The foundation is the Tanakh, is the Bible. So when you don't have that, your building is going to fall every time. Juch. Why? Because you don't have what to hold it up. What holds it up? That you know the Bible, the Tanakh. That's the whole thing. 24 books of the Bible, right? How many books in the Tanakh? 24, right? We're not talking about what they study, the Goyim, that's not Tanakh. That's garbage, right? They call it the New Testament. I call it the No Testament. There's no Testament over there. There's nothing, right? No Testament. That's what it is. There's nothing there. It's all garbage, right? But we, right, we have the real Torah. So a person has to know these psukim. By the way, they told me, I'll tell you something interesting. They told me, the Temanim, the Yemenite rabbis, what they told me? They said, if you wanted to be a rabbi in Teman, if you wanted to be a rabbi over there, they had a system like this, You had to know the whole Tanakh by heart. Baal Peh. If you didn't know the whole Tanakh by heart, they didn't make you a rabbi. You couldn't get a slicha.
Most of the rabbis today, when doing lectures, they do halakha.
Yeah.
They're going to do halakha, they're going to do stuff that people can...
Right. The thing is, the whole Talmud is based on that, right? That's the whole thing, So when you don't have it,
people can learn. They cannot learn by themselves.
What can you do, right? Israelis, they know how to, right? The Israelis, it's amazing, You go to Israel, even the Amei Aratzot, the simple people, they know psukim over there, They tell you, Baal Peh, like orally, this pasuk, that pasuk. They know all he knows, right? They tell you psukim like this, they throw it at you. Because they know, when they were a kid, they learned the Tanakh, they learned Bible, That's the whole thing. So a person, has to know Tanakh, before he's able to be Talmid Chacham. Otherwise, he's really Am Haaretz, that's what he is, Trying to build something, but it never really, just every time falls down, right? So, Ibn Mechila.
The kids going to the yeshiva.
Yeah. That's the thing, Sometimes, they don't learn it so good. They're supposed to learn it, like when they're little, like when they go to first grade, they're supposed to learn Tanakh over there. They're supposed to finish the whole thing, more or less, right? More or less finish the whole thing. But the problem is,
That means they know what they're doing.
but the problem is, they don't learn it so good. That's the thing. A lot of them don't know. A lot of them don't know the Tanakh. That's the thing. I'll tell you a joke and we'll stop here. Mikhail, I don't want to go too long. You have to do Arvit.
It's not a joke.
I'll tell you a joke. Yeah, it's okay. It's not a joke. You're right, but we have to laugh a little bit. So we shouldn't be too sad. So a funny story. One Ashkenazi, guy that he was learning in yeshiva. He told me a funny story about this. A joke. That they make in the yeshivot. They say, we read the Chumash. We know that Moshe and Aaron, they were brothers, right? Who doesn't know that, right? Everybody knows. But those guys, who are learning Talmud in yeshiva, they didn't learn the Chumash, so they don't know from there that Moshe and so what they do is they make a pilpul, They may say, well, you see from there, right, that since Moshe and Aaron were together, and they were led to go, you see from there that they were brothers, What do you mean you see from there? You didn't read the Chumash? That they were brothers? You have to learn from a pilpul? You have to derive it? That means, right, you're Amaretz, you don't know the Tanakh, right? That's the whole thing. So a person, in order to, that's what Rashi says also in the Chumash. He says, right, that a person who wants to be a Talmid Chacham, he has to be Baki in the 24 books of the Tanakh. Before you do that, right, you got really nothing there, As we said, right, also the Gaon Vilna, he also says this, You should learn the Tanakh, he says, when you're a child, until you know it almost like Baal Peh, orally, everything, like Baal Peh. Okay, today we're not on this level, so much maybe, to know the whole Tanakh, Baal Peh. But that's what it was in the old days, In the old days, they knew Baal Peh, they knew orally the whole Tanakh. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chaim שאומר, אצל הקדוש ברוך הוא לעזור לישראל, לפיכך הכיר בא להם תורה ומצווה, שנאמר אדוני חפש, למען צדקו יגדיל תורה בידי.